Good afternoon. My name is Deirdre Ducharme, and I welcome you to an overview of the Smarter Balanced English Language Arts Literacy Interim Assessments 101, a presentation designed for educators who want to know more about the ELA interim assessments and the components that support the administration, scoring, and reporting of the ELA blocks. An overview of the Smarter Balanced Mathematics Interim Assessments 101 will be offered this upcoming Monday, November 14th. All users of the interim assessments may be interested in learning about the new Airways Interim Assessment Reporting System presented on January 19th, 2017. Please visit our website for more information. A recording of Webinar 1, What's New on the Smarter Balanced Interim Assessments, is posted to the CT portal, while a recording of Webinar 2, an overview of the Smarter Balanced Interim Assessments, will be posted to the Connecticut portal sometime next week. Though participants will be muted during today's webinar, questions can be posted using the chat and Q&A platform. All unanswered questions will be addressed at the conclusion of this presentation. Additionally, questions can be emailed using the contact information provided at the end of this presentation. I'd like to welcome my co-presenter, Dr. Christy Alberino, an ELA consultant for the Bureau of Student Assessment. Christy and I have worked for the Bureau of Student Assessment for more than 2.5 decades combined and served in a national leadership role with the Smarter Balanced Consortium with a focus on English language arts across grades 3 through 8 and high school. Together, we have a deep understanding of the many components of assessment-related activities, especially in the areas of formative, interim, and summative assessments. We hope that you find the information in this presentation useful as you consider the possible uses of incorporating the ELA Smarter Balanced Interim Assessment tools in your district or school to inform instruction and improve student learning.
Welcome. In this webinar, we will review terminology that is specific to the Smarter Balanced assessments to help you understand how the assessment is designed and to group specific ELA standards. We will present an overview of the ELA blocks and interim assessment block blueprints specific to the 4 ELA claims: reading, writing, listening, and research. Additionally, we will explain the hand scoring process used for those items that cannot be scored by the computer and require the use of the teacher hand scoring system. Finally, we're going to explore the Airways system, which provides access to student, class, school, and district level interim assessment results, along with other valuable reporting features. Unlike instructional objectives, which are derived from the content standards and written to guide teaching during a lesson or across a series of lessons, learning targets frame a lesson from a student point of view. A learning target helps students grasp the lesson's purpose. Why is it crucial to learn this chunk of information on this day and in this way? With this in mind, the 4 learning targets stated on the slide inform participants of the learning goals based on the scope of this presentation. By the end of the presentation, participants will understand the interim assessment blocks that are available at each level and what is measured in each block. Participants will know how to use the hand scoring materials for English language arts and the purposes and benefits of using the interim assessments. To ensure that the non-secure, non-public classification of the interim items, stimuli, and scoring materials is preserved, materials should not be published, printed, or distributed for non-instructional uses. Rather, interim assessment materials should be used for the purpose of training district educators who are responsible for scoring student responses in the teacher hand scoring system or for improving teaching practice in the classroom. As we delve into the blocks, it's important that everyone understand the terminology or the language of Smarter Balanced. We begin with our claims. A claim is a summary statement about the knowledge and skills students are expected to demonstrate on the assessment related to a particular aspect of the CT core standards. As this slide indicates, there are 4 claims in English language arts: reading, writing, listening, and research. The claim statements identify the overall expectation of skills performed in the areas of these 4 claims needed for college and career readiness. So Claim 1 for reading expects that students can read closely and analytically to comprehend a range of increasingly complex literary and informational texts. Claim 2, writing, sets the expectation that students can provide effective and well-grounded writing for a range of purposes and audiences. In listening, students should employ effective listening skills, and in research, they should engage in research and inquiry to investigate topics and to analyze, integrate, and present information. Each claim is made up of a number of assessment targets that are aligned to and measure specific skills identified by the CT core standards. Assessment targets provide more detail about the range of content and depth of knowledge levels being assessed. Targets translate the Common Core standards into measurable statements from which test blueprints and item specs are derived. All assessment items and tasks described in the Smarter Balance assessment targets are aligned with one or more of the standards. The Smarter Balance content specifications contain detailed information about the assessment targets for all claims and their alignment to Common Core standards, and these can be found on the Smarter Balance webpage under the Assessment tab and at the top of the screen. Then select Development and Design. The Common Core standards require high-level cognitive demand, such as asking students to demonstrate deeper conceptual understanding through the application of content knowledge and skills to new situation and sustained tasks. The blueprint for the Smarter Balance assessment system, therefore, requires that questions cover a range of cognitive levels. Interpreting and assigning depth of knowledge levels to assessment items is an essential requirement of alignment analysis. 4 levels of DOK are used for the Smarter Balance items. These can be influenced by item type, and most of the constructed responses have higher DOK levels. When scoring open-ended responses, teachers will need to assess 2 documents. First is the training guide. A training guide is a document that contains information about an item. In it, teachers will find the stimulus or the material that precedes a question, an item stem, an item-specific rubric, a code document explaining which responses might not receive a score, and lastly, a target chart for that claim area and grade. An exemplar set is another name for anchor set. Exemplar sets contain item metadata such as grade, claim being measured, the assessment target to which the item corresponds, as well as a list of standards aligned to that target, the stem or question, the score assigned to the response that you're looking at, and annotations explaining the scores for each of the student responses. Following the anchor set is a check set, which contains samples of student responses that can be scored for practice. At the end of the document is an answer key and annotation provided for scorers so they can double check their work. All the responses are ordered from high to low score points.
As we begin to discuss the ELA blocks, we should take a few moments to point out the designs of our items. Most of the items are associated with stimuli, either a recording in the listening, or a claim, or a story in literary text, and informational articles in the read informational text, and performance task blocks. And it is important to note that each and every stimuli went through a rigorous review process before we opted to develop items with them. This process included text complexity placemats for literary and informational text, as well as the development and use of an easy listening formula and complexity placemat for the listening stimuli in order to provide grade-level appropriate complex text throughout the assessment. Now let's see what the ELA interim blocks offer. In English language arts, blocks are designed to measure reading comprehension of literary and informational text, writing, listening, and research. As you can see from this blueprint, there are 2 reading blocks with a focus on literary and informational texts. There are several writing blocks. The revision, editing, and language and vocabulary use are available in grades 3 through 7 in high school. While in grade A, the Edit Revise block measures a combination of the revision, editing, and language vocabulary use. The expectation is that in the future there will be enough items in grade 8 to supplement and offer the individualized writing blocks. Research, although not a new block for the interim assessments, was supplemented with more items this past year and now includes 18 items each. Each grade has 1 performance task in either opinion, argumentative writing, informational explanatory writing, or narrative. Remember that this performance task block is the same performance task as the one in that grade provided in the interim comprehensive assessment, and all except grade 11 are the same performance tasks as last year. Let's begin with a review of the reading blocks. Here are the targets for Claim 1 reading. As you can see, there are 7 targets for reading literary text and the same 7 targets for reading informational text. Block 1 measures students' ability to read complex literary texts. We use a variety of machine-scored item types across all 14 targets, such as single correct multiple choice, multiple correct multiple choice, hot text, and 2-part multiple choice items. In some instances, students must demonstrate their understanding by responding to a constructed response item, which requires hand scoring. For example, a student may be asked to explain the main idea, theme, or central idea of a text and support it and explain it by using evidence from the text, as indicated by Target 2. The expectation for Target 4 requires students to make inferences or draw conclusions about a text or a portion of the text while using key evidence to support and explain those inferences or conclusions. Targets 2 and Targets 4 are marked with a star to indicate that they may include open-ended short text questions. The same expectations apply when assessing the informational targets as shown on the next slide. Again, Targets 9 and 11 are marked by a star, and these items may include open-ended. Now let's take a moment to look at the interim blocks that measure Claim 2 writing. Here are the Claim 2 writing targets. You might notice that Targets 5 and 10 are not assessed on the interim or summative, but are identified by the standards. As the interim assessments grow in the future, we may have the capacity to measure these skills. These writing assessment targets are broken up into blocks by the skills being measured. Let's take a look at the blocks available for writing. The first block is Block 3 and contains 6 brief writes. These brief writes require students to write between 1 and 2 paragraphs to respond to the prompts. In other words, this block has all open-ended short text items. This means that all responses in Block 3 need to be hand-scored by teachers using the teacher hand-scoring system before a score can be provided in the reporting system. Each brief write provides students with a simulated student-level piece of writing and asks students to focus on one area of writing, such as developing a claim, opinion, main idea, or thesis, or using details that support, elaborate, or require students to use transitions or clarify openings or tightening conclusions. You might notice that all 3 writing purposes are represented in Block 3, so students at all grade levels are expected to be familiar with narrative, informational explanatory, and opinion argumentative techniques. The expectation is that student responses are also consistent with the purpose and tone established by the stimulus. Although conventions are not assessed in this block, teachers can certainly see where their students need help in that area when scoring these short responses. Block 4 focuses on the revision of a piece of simulated grade-level appropriate student writing. All of the items in this block are machine scored. Students are prompted to choose a more applicable opinion or claim statement or a stronger concluding sentence. They might be asked to choose information that should be removed from a paragraph because it is not supporting the main idea or detracts from the writing. For all grades except for grade 8, the Edit Revise block has been separated into blocks 4, 5, and 6. Block 5, as you can see on the screen, focuses on the use of construct-relevant vocabulary or concrete words and phrases, the incorporation of effective sensory details to convey experiences and events, or the ability to choose the best word or phrase to convey an idea in a text precisely. All of the items in Block 5 and 6 are machine scored. The Edit block, Block 6, is our conventions block. Here, students will be assessed on their ability to demonstrate an adequate command of correct sentence formation, punctuation, capitalization, grammar usage, and spelling. Before we present the performance task block, let's take a few moments to look at the listening and research blocks. We cannot forget the importance of listening in college and career readiness. It is imperative that students are able to delineate, integrate, and evaluate content presented orally. Only Target 4, Listen and Interpret, is currently measured on the interim and summative assessments. This target, depending on the grade level, expects students to interpret and use information delivered orally. All of the items in this listening block are machine scored. There are approximately 5 stimuli in each block. The item difficulty, or DOK, ranges from 1 to 3. There are 2 places where research questions appear in the interim blocks. The first is within the actual research block. The second is Part 1 of the performance task. We will begin by reviewing research items within Block 8 and then move to the performance task block. There are 3 targets that are measured in the summative and interim assessments. Target 2, interpret and integrate information, or in the upper grades, analyze, integrate information. Target 3, analyze information and sources. And lastly, Target 4, using evidence. These targets are assessed in the research interim blocks. The research block represents items students will see in the CAT portion of the summative assessments. These are machine-scored items. Students are expected to read a short stimulus and might be prompted to answer questions about plagiarizing information, or perhaps they will be asked to compare multiple accounts of a historical event. They might be asked to consider evidence provided in a research paper and evaluate its value. But again, this isn't the last place that students will see research items. The performance task also incorporates research questions, 2 of which are open-ended and require hand scoring. As mentioned, our ELA performance task measures 2 claims: writing, because it includes a full write in which organization purpose, evidence and elaboration, and conventions are taken into consideration. The second claim measured is research, in which students are given 3 questions, 1 machine-scored item, and 2 short open-ended questions. The performance tasks in grades 3 through 5 measure students' abilities in narrative, opinion, and informational writing. In grades 6 through 8 in high school, those purposes change to narrative, argumentative, and explanatory writing. Each performance task block measures more than just the full writing piece. There are the 2 hand-scored research items, the 1 machine-scored research item, comprised in Part 1 of the performance task. As seen before, the blue stars indicate that there are open-ended responses associated with these assessment targets. As a reminder, there is only 1 performance task block per grade at this point in time. We hope that as we continue to build the item bank for this system, that more performance tasks will be added.
Now that we've explained the content of the ELA interim blocks, we need to explain to everyone how to locate them. First, you need to access the CT portal. The Connecticut State Department of Education Comprehensive Assessment Program portal can be accessed at the address at the top of this slide. From the portal, choose the Smarter Balance Assessment button on the left side of the page. This gives you access to systems associated with Smarter Balance, included but not limited to the digital library, reporting systems, test manuals, and additional resources. Now that you've completed these steps, you're ready to administer the interim assessments. All the interim assessments are accessed through the Test Administration section of the assessment portal. Using the same test administration interface as the Smarter Balance summative assessments, teachers will select the most appropriate interim assessment from the menu. Once the test administration site has been accessed, you will be presented with a menu tree. Remember to choose the interim assessment blocks that you're interested in administering. After selecting the grade of choice, the user will have an option of choosing a content area, such as ELA or math. Once a content area is selected, the user will be prompted to select an interim comprehensive assessment or an interim block. For illustrative purposes, we might choose an interim block, grade 3, reading literary text. To start the test, the user would select Start Session on the bottom left of that square and follow a series of instructions presented on the screen that outline the steps for starting a session, approving students, and monitoring progress. Step-by-step instructions are available in 2 places: the TA User Guide or the Interim Assessment User Guide, both of which are available on the portal. The teacher hand scoring system is the one platform that supports the scoring of the interim assessments. It is accessed on the CT assessment portal with a tied username and password and provides teachers access to open-ended student responses and the scoring rubrics and training guides that are associated with those specific items. The first step prior to accessing interim results is to determine if the administered block contains items that are machine-scored only, a combination of machine-scored and hand-scored items, or solely hand-scored items, such as the brief write blocks. Access to data via the Airways reporting system will be dependent on the type of items comprised within the block. For example, blocks that are entirely machine-scored will yield immediate results available through Airways. However, blocks containing open-ended items will require teacher training for hand scoring and the actual scoring of these items using the teacher hand scoring system before the data is available for that particular block. We'll discuss this in more detail in a moment. For now, let's review the process for scoring open-ended responses. The teacher hand scoring system contains all interim assessment items completed by students that require hand scoring. Designated teachers or hand scorers will use the system to access these items and all scoring material associated with the items, such as rubrics or training guides. As long as the teachers are trained on the items, scoring may be assigned to the primary teacher or another teacher as appropriate. Assigning to another teacher may be one consideration to minimize the potential of bias or subjectivity. However, scoring assignments are based on the discretion of the school or district administrator. After teachers have reviewed the training materials, they'll use the hand scoring system to access a student's response and submit an appropriate score. We'll now take a few minutes to show you how to access and score student responses. When you first log into the system, you will see all of the responses waiting to be scored. These can be sorted by student name, by item and title, by session, or by status. You choose the response that you want to score, and then you click the Score button. Scores and administrators can sort by tests, and then with the appropriate permissions, assign scores to specific items. As a reminder, as long as the teachers are trained on the items, scoring can be assigned to the primary teacher or another teacher as appropriate. When you choose the score option on the right, you first see the rubric associated with the item, and then below that, the question and the student's response. The question and the student's response below the rubric look like this. One place you can access the exemplar set and training guide is above the rubric for the specific item you're scoring. The teacher hand scoring system gives the scorer access to each training guide, which contains directions for using the materials, a stimulus or stimuli if appropriate, the item stem, a rubric, condition codes, and lastly, a chart of the grade level claim and target information that corresponds to that item. The exemplar sets are the same as last year. Each contains annotated and scored student responses for that specific item. There's also a check set with annotations and an answer key. Hand scoring materials are also available in TIDE, which provides access to the materials without having to administer an interim assessment block. These materials can be downloaded or exported for more convenient access. To locate the materials in TIDE, sign in and find the General Resources tab in the upper right corner of the page. From the drop-down menu, choose Teacher Hand Scoring Material. Then, download the zipped files of materials sorted by content area and grade, by block or ICA, and then within the block, items are sorted by brief rights, performance task, reading informational text, and reading literary text. And these can be downloaded and printed out if necessary. On the portal, under Smarter Balance Resources, there's a folder for rubrics. In that folder, we've placed copies of the ELA Full Right rubrics. If you choose to use these rubrics beyond the single performance task posted on the interim site, you can copy them and combine them with your own writing prompts from your lessons. Once you've administered the blocks and scored the open-ended responses, you'll obviously be anxious to see the results. Airways is our new reporting system designed to provide detailed, item-level student performance reports for the interim assessments. Assessment reports are available at various levels within a district. Access to each assessment report depends on your user role. An Airways training session hosted by AIR had been recorded and posted to the portal. Check the Student Assessment newsletter for more information. For more immediate information on this system, check the user guide in the portal or visit the overview of the interim assessments for both beginning and returning users. One of those webinars is already posted on the CT portal. The second should be posted shortly. American Institutes for Research presented a webinar on the Airways reporting system last week, and the recording is available on the CT portal. Additionally, we will host an overview of Airways on January 19th as the fifth and final webinar in this series, and we hope you'll join us. This is the point where we need all of you to think about your classroom populations and the individual needs of your students. Think about both the struggling and high-performing readers. Think about English language learners. Think about your students with disabilities. Based on the expectations and the standards and your newly gained understanding of the interim assessments, how might you enhance your instruction based on the valuable information you receive? How can these short, focused assessments benefit you and your students? Interims are very different from summative assessments. An interim might be given multiple times throughout the year, and they really provide domain-level information to help teachers better evaluate and support student learning. These assessments are meant to be used at a closer level, such as the class or grade level. So the blocks that you've just learned about allow students the chance to practice a subset of grade-level appropriate focused skills in an online platform. And these blocks include all types of items, and because they're connected to TIDE, students who are eligible for accommodations during the summative assessments will have access to these, as well as any universal tools available to all students. However, be aware that those supports and accommodations must be entered into TIDE before they are available for use on the interim assessments. One of the benefits of the interim assessments is to provide teachers and students with an additional resource that measures students' strengths and weaknesses when assessed on specific content and skills aligned to the Connecticut core standards throughout the school year. The incorporation of these tools can enhance the learning in classrooms as well as support professional development. Remember, these can be used out of grade, but keep in mind that to do so requires you to adjust the grade in TIDE. And teachers really need a clear purpose as to why an out-of-grade level interim would be appropriate. Hand scoring and analyzing the results of performance-based student assessments allow teachers to learn more about the standards, their students, and their teaching practice. This is all part of the system. Summative and formative measures, and a connection to the Smarter Balanced digital library. Hand scoring and analyzing the results of performance-based student assessments allow teachers to learn more about their students. But we need to remind everyone that you can and should view the blocks using the Assessment Viewing Application, or AVA. This is located on the portal. It's a system that allows you to see an interim assessment exactly as the student sees them. Teachers must respond to an item to move through a test, but scores are not given and opportunities are not saved. With this application, teachers can see if and how their curriculum aligns to what is being measured. Timing is an important factor. Remember that while some blocks may only take 20 minutes, others, like the performance task, can be longer than 1.5 hours. Teachers need to train on the teacher hand scoring system with the materials before they can score the students' open-ended responses. In a block that includes both machine-scored and open-ended responses, no score will be available without all the items hand-scored and submitted. The scoring of these items can take time, but we believe it's a valuable tool to help shed light on what students know and can do. Lastly, make sure you are aware of the types of reports you will generate and if that data will provide you with the appropriate information to improve your instruction. We will now address unanswered questions that were posted during the webinar. If you have questions and have not posted them through the Q&A, please post them now.
Christy, the first question posted regards the use of the performance task. I believe it's for the summative assessment. The question asks, will there be a performance task this year? Last year we didn't have one. That's a great question, and for the purposes of our summative assessment, there is no performance task for the English language arts assessment. But we do encourage you to use the PT block in the interim assessments to help measure writing in your school or classroom. Our second question asks, is it true that if you give the interim comprehensive assessment, you also need to give the performance task in order to obtain a score? And in fact, that is true. We do recommend that you use the interim assessment blocks instead of the ICA, and if you have any questions about administering an ICA, we ask that you contact us. There's a question regarding mathematics. Will the classroom activity be required this year? No classroom activities are required for math. And our second to last question asks if there is an interim containing both computer-scored and hand-scored items, can a teacher only administer the computer-scored items? No, that is not possible. And our final question asks, does the interim assessment library make suggested connections to any items in the digital library? And we are in the process of providing a connection between interim assessment results within specific blocks to resources that are available through the digital library. Thank you very much for your questions. If you have any additional questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact us using our contact information provided on this slide. We thank you for your participation in today's webinar. Have a great afternoon and a successful school year.